In golf, elegance and calm are almost a religion. But even in this sport, where silence and precision seem to rule, there are moments that break every rule. And situations so ridiculous that they have been permanently etched into history. Today, we will review the 20 most embarrassing episodes ever seen on a golf course. From professionals losing their temper in front of thousands of spectators to mistakes so absurd they are hard to believe. And pay attention, because what you are about to see is not what one would expect to find in the most refined sport in the world. Moment 1. Peter's explosion. Dallas, 2025. LIV Golf Tournament. Thomas Pieters is grouped with his controversial teammate, Patrick Reed, a player well known for attracting controversy. The atmosphere was already tense when a spectator decided to provoke from the gallery. We don't know exactly what was said, but it was enough to light the fuse. Pieters, who had been dragging through a disastrous round, completely lost control. Instead of taking it out on his clubs, as is often the case, he crossed the spectator rope with his putter in hand, confronting the fan directly as if it were a boxing ring. Meanwhile, Reed kept his focus, holed a difficult putt for par, and limited himself to throwing an icy glance toward that section of the stands. The incident lasted only a few minutes, but the damage was already done. Pieters collapsed with bogeys and a double bogey, while Reed went on to win the tournament in a playoff, totally unfazed. A brutal contrast between two teammates, and an uncomfortable spectacle for everyone who witnessed it. Moment 2. Cantlay's unbearable pace. Slow play is one of the most criticized issues in modern golf, and Patrick Cantlay has become the leading example of that problem. His pre-shot routine is endless. Foot movements, adjustments, more movements, and the clock moves on relentlessly. During the final round of the Tour Championship, his lack of urgency reached such an extreme that even the commentators could not hide their frustration. The cameras kept cutting back to Cantlay, and there he still was, motionless, rocking back and forth, without hitting the ball. The debate exploded on social media. Phil Mickelson, never one to shy away from controversy, took the opportunity to mock him with a devastating calculation. 26-foot movements before a single shot, multiplied by 36 holes. That equals 936 repetitions in a tournament. A true calf workout, according to Mickelson. Cantlay, unfazed, responded that the pace of play issue was not an individual problem, but a tour-wide one. However, Mickelson's mockery went viral and exposed what many already believed. Cantlay's talent is unquestionable, but his slowness has become a spectacle that is as frustrating as it is embarrassing. Moment 3. Anne van Dam's trap driver. Drama at Landcastle, tournament finale. The Dutch player, Anne van Dam, had just finished the final hole with a birdie, earning her a place in a playoff for the title. The tension was at its peak, confidence was back, and everything seemed set for an epic finish. She climbed into an official cart on the way to the 18th tee, but midway through the ride, the unthinkable happened. As the cart passed under the rope separating the crowd, the accessory got tangled in her bag and snagged her driver like a hook. In a matter of seconds, the club was yanked out, hit the ground, and snapped in two. The cruelest part, she had already lost her main driver days earlier on a flight. This was her last option. With a face full of frustration, Van Dam had to improvise, play the playoff with a 3-wood, and try to stay in contention. However, luck was not on her side. Her opponent holed a spectacular eagle and took the title. For Van Dam, what should have been a great opportunity ended up becoming one of the most absurd and painful scenes of her career. Moment 4. The disastrous Tiger and Phil experiment. Ryder Cup, 2004. U.S. Captain Hal Sutton believed he had found the magic formula, pairing Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson, two of the best golfers on the planet, on the same team. On paper, an unbeatable duo. In reality, a recipe for disaster. The problem was obvious. Tiger and Phil had never clicked. Not in playing style, not in personality, and certainly not on a personal level. And to make matters worse, in the foursomes format they had to share the same ball. Tiger played a high-spin ball, Phil a low-spin one, completely opposite. While the rest of the team practiced, Mickelson had to spend hours adapting to a ball he wasn't familiar with, while Tiger grew increasingly uncomfortable. The result was a disaster on the course, losses in both the morning and afternoon sessions, without earning a single point. The Dream Team turned into the biggest fiasco in recent Ryder Cup history. Europe dominated, and the United States suffered one of its most humiliating defeats. Sutton's experiment went down in the books as an example of how chemistry is just as important as talent in team golf. Moment 5. Richard Finch's Icy Bath. Irish Open, 2008. But golf has a strange habit of testing players even in the safest moments. His tee shot was solid, straight down the fairway. The second shot, however, ended up in the rough, dangerously close to the River Maige. Finch found himself on an awkward slope and, with the title on the line, decided to take a risk. He struck hard, and in doing so, lost his balance. The result was a dramatic fall into the water in front of stunned spectators. While the Englishman struggled to climb out of the river like a disoriented salmon, his ball had miraculously ended up on the green. Despite the humiliation, he recovered and managed to win the tournament by 2 shots. A victory stained with glory and soaked in embarrassment. Moment 6. Nelly Korda's curse at Evian. The Evian Championship seems to have something personal against Nelly Korda. In 2022, during the final round, one of her shots ended up among the wood chips lining the spectators' path. Up to that point, nothing unusual. What must never be done in golf, touching a ball that is in play, had happened in the middle of competition. But incredibly, the story repeated itself 3 years later, in 2025, at the same tournament. This time, a child decided to grab another of Korda's balls, again during play. 2 identical incidents in the same championship involving the same player. A coincidence so unlikely that many began to speak of a genuine curse for the world number 1 every time she steps onto the course at Evian Lisbon. Moment 7. Ricky Fowler's ordeal in Phoenix. Waste Management Phoenix Open, 2019. Ricky Fowler started the final round with a 4-shot lead. Everything suggested he was heading toward a comfortable victory, until he reached the 11th hole. His second shot came up short, a minor mistake. But the third marked the beginning of the disaster. The ball landed on a soaked green, bounced, went past the flag, and slid downhill until it fell into the water. Penalty. After the drop, Ricky proceeded to drop the ball. Once, it rolled into the water. Twice, the same result. By rule, he had to place it on the slope. It seemed stable. Then the impossible happened. Without anyone touching it, with no wind or movement, the ball decided to roll back into the water on its own. Another penalty stroke. Fowler ended up signing for a triple bogey 7 and saw his 5-shot lead shrink to just 1. An episode so absurd that it remains remembered as one of the greatest strokes of bad luck in modern golf history. Moment 8. Bernhard Langer's controversial putter. Bernhard Langer is considered one of the most successful players on the senior circuit, but also one of the most controversial, all because of his putting style. In 2016, the USGA banned anchoring the putter against the body. Many players changed their technique or their club. Langer, however, made only a minimal adjustment. He moved his top hand just a few centimeters away from his chest, claiming that this way he was complying with the rules. Since then, he has continued to win titles, but the images never stop sparking debate. In the eyes of many, he is still anchoring the putter, even though officials have reviewed his style time and again and have always declared it legal. The issue flared up again after his victory at the PNC Championship against Tiger and Charlie Woods, where replays seemed to show questionable contact, a loophole within the rules or just a visual illusion. Either way, Langer has found himself at the center of a controversy that seems never-ending. Moment 9. Stephen Gallagher's Hell in India. Hero Indian Open. Stephen Gallagher was writing a perfect story. -8 overall. Just 3 shots off the lead. And with his 8-year-old son carrying the bag. A dream day. But on the 7th hole, reality took a cruel turn. His tee shot went into the thick rough on the left. Nothing out of the ordinary. Until, while searching for the ball, it simply never appeared. Swallowed by the grass, back to the tee. Second attempt, same direction, same fate, another lost ball. Third, identical result. The crowd couldn't believe it, and his son watched in disbelief as his father seemed to have forgotten his craft. Only on the fourth attempt did he finally find the fairway. Too late. The damage was done. He finished with a quadruple bogey 8, and what should have been an inspiring family tale turned into a viral embarrassment in front of thousands of spectators and television cameras. Moment 10. Billy Horschel's slip at the Masters. Augusta, 2021. Billy Horschel made his first mistake before even hitting a shot. He chose white pants for the third round, an unnecessary risk on a course where history does not forgive carelessness. On the 13th hole, his ball came to rest under the water of Rice Creek. Instead of taking a drop, he decided to attempt the impossible. He took off his shoes, rolled up his pants, and stepped into the stream to try the shot. The plan was bold, but the execution was a catastrophe. The wet slope betrayed him. He slipped and ended up sitting in the water, soaking his white clothing live for the whole world to see. Even so, he struck the ball, got it onto the green, and saved par with 2 putts. A display of courage, but also a reminder that at Augusta, wardrobe mistakes can be remembered just as vividly as sporting ones. Moment 11. Phil Mickelson's 10 in Texas. Valero Texas Open, 2021. Phil Mickelson is known for his high-risk style, capable of turning an impossible shot into magic or into disaster. That day in San Antonio, the coin landed on the wrong side. He arrived at the 18th hole at 2 over par. Nothing brilliant but not disastrous either. From the tee, everything looked promising. A drive of more than 300 yards down the middle of the fairway, a trademark lefty shot. The gallery expected a spectacular finish, but what followed was a complete collapse. His second shot, into the water. The next, more trouble. One after another, the mistakes piled up until the situation became grotesque. From 1 shot, it went to 3, from 3 to 5, and from 5 to 10. Yes, Mickelson signed for a 10 on a par 5, one of the worst scores of his entire career. The crowd fell silent. The commentators were at a loss for words, and his scorecard looked like a lament written in numbers. For a genius capable of the impossible, it was a fall as hard as it was unforgettable. G1s. Moment 12. Hunter Mahan's collapse at the Ryder Cup. Celtic Manor, 2010. The United States was on the verge of a historic comeback at the Ryder Cup. Everything depended on Hunter Mahan, who arrived at the 17th hole with the task of saving a decisive point against Europe. The atmosphere was one of maximum tension. He had a straightforward position, a chip from just off the green, a shot he had practiced thousands of times throughout his career. But pressure can turn the ordinary into a nightmare. Mahan took his stance, made the swing, and the ball barely moved a few feet, like a weak putt on a children's mini golf course. The disappointment was immediate. He needed to hole a long putt to keep hope alive, but with his confidence gone, he missed again. The European crowd erupted in celebration, while Mahan stood frozen, wishing he could disappear. A cruel moment that sealed his team's defeat and followed him for years as one of the great collapses in Ryder Cup history. Moment 13. Bay Hill, 1999. Trapped in a bunker next to the green, Love was looking for a controlled escape. Frustrated, he slammed his club into the sand, and that's when the show began. The iron struck a hidden sprinkler head squarely. Within seconds, water burst out with the force of a fire hydrant, flooding the bunker and soaking the green. Love stood motionless, watching in disbelief as the hole turned into a pool live on television. In the end, he managed to regroup and save par, but no one remembers the score. What remained etched in memory was the surreal scene of a golf course transformed into a fountain thanks to a poorly channeled burst of anger. Moment 14. Bubba Watson's outburst at his Cadie. Travelers Championship, 2013. Bubba Watson had the lead in his hands. All he needed was to stay calm and play smart on the 16th hole, a short par 3. But the story took a very different turn. He chose a 9-iron, executed the shot, and the ball went straight into the water. The mistake was already serious, but what followed was worse. Instead of taking responsibility, Bubba unleashed his frustration on his caddy, Ted Scott, harshly asking whether that really was the right club. The tension was palpable. After the penalty, his next shot flew over the green. A triple bogey wiped out his chances. An additional bogey on the next hole dropped him to 4th place. The most embarrassing part was not the mistake itself, but publicly blaming the person who was supposed to be his closest ally. A scene that left a mark on him and exposed the most uncomfortable side of the player-caddy relationship under pressure. Moment 15. The comment that cost Gary McCord dearly. The Masters at Augusta is synonymous with solemnity. A tournament of etiquette. At a club where every word and every gesture must live up to the green jacket. But in 1994, commentator Gary McCord broke that delicate balance and paid for it with exile. During an afternoon broadcast, McCord wanted to add some color to his commentary. After seeing a spa advertisement offering hair removal services, he described Augusta's greens as so fast they looked like they'd been waxed with Brazilian wax. And, as if that weren't enough, minutes later, he referred to some mounds behind a green as body bags. The result was immediate. The members of Augusta Nacional did not tolerate the joke. McCord was banned for life from the Masters broadcast booth. He never returned to golf's most prestigious tournament, all because of a couple of sentences that crossed the invisible line of tradition. Moment 16. Patrick Reed's shh at the Ryder Cup. Glen Eagles, 2014. Patrick Reed was making his Ryder Cup debut, and the European crowd had no intention of giving him a warm welcome. From the first tee, jeers could already be heard over a missed putt from the previous day. Any rookie might have lowered his head and let his golf do the talking. Reed chose a different path. After holing a key putt, he didn't celebrate with a restrained gesture. He stared straight at the crowd, put a finger to his lips, and demanded silence with a forceful shh. The reaction was immediate. Boos and even louder chants from the stands. Reed became a villain to Europe and a hero to those who appreciate provocation in a hostile setting. It was a moment as controversial as it was unforgettable on television. One that defined his persona, both on and off the course. Moment 17. Brooks Koepka's unraveling. PGA Championship 2020. If Brooks Koepka has anything in abundance, it's confidence. He entered the final round just 2 shots off the lead and, before even stepping onto the course, didn't hesitate to fire a shot at his rivals. He pointed out that Dustin Johnson had only 1 major in his career, while he already had 4. The problem is that golf punishes arrogance. On Sunday, Koepka sank into a full-blown disaster. Bogeys, missed putts, erratic swings. He closed with a 74, 4 over par, one of the worst rounds of the day. Meanwhile, Colin Morikawa, one of the young players he had downplayed, signed a sensational 64 and lifted his first major. Koepka didn't just lose. He tumbled all the way to 29th place. A brutal blow to his pride. The moral of the story. In golf, talking is easy. Backing it up with results is the hard part. Moment 18. Ben Crenshaw's putting hell. Western Open, 1979. Ben Crenshaw, regarded as one of the greatest putters in history, faced a 15-foot putt for birdie. Routine work for someone of his talent. But that day, the golf gods decided to humble him. He missed the first putt. Nothing serious. But then he also missed the comeback putt for par. And then the next one, for bogey. One after another, the misses piled up until the unthinkable happened. 7 strokes on the green. A quadruple bogey 8 that went into the record books as one of the worst putting performances in PGA Tour history. Crenshaw, distraught, withdrew from the tournament after just 9 holes. A putting genius publicly undone by a single green in one of the most bewildering images of his career. Moment 19. Hudson Swafford's Kirsty vote. Nationwide Children's Hospital Championship, 2013. Hudson Swafford was preparing for a routine shot from the fairway. But what happened was as strange as it was embarrassing. On one of those swings, he tore out a massive divot that, in a bizarre twist, flew forward and struck his ball directly. The result? The ball moved several feet. From a simple practice swing, Swafford froze in disbelief. And worse was yet to come. Under the rules, if a player causes his ball to move, even accidentally, he receives a penalty stroke and must replace it in its original position. So Swafford not only looked foolish, but also had to absorb a penalty that was as unusual as it was painful. One of those moments that show that in golf, even the most absurd situations can be costly. Moment 20. Phil Mickelson's awkward settling of scores. Ryder Cup, 2014. The United States defeat at Gleneagles was painful, but what came afterward was even more embarrassing. In the middle of a press conference, with Captain Tom Watson sitting just inches away, Phil Mickelson decided to air the team's dirty laundry. Instead of dodging the question about the failure, Mickelson publicly praised Paul Azinger's leadership model in 2008, the last time they had won the Ryder Cup. He emphasized how Azinger had given players a voice and created an environment of trust. The implied comparison was brutal. Watson, sitting right there, represented the exact opposite. The tension in the room was unbearable. Teammates staring at the floor, journalists holding their breath, and an icy silence from the captain. It was the golfing equivalent of witnessing an uncomfortable family argument in public, a scene that remains etched as one of the most embarrassing press conferences in the history of golf. Moment 21. Jon Rahm's incredible mistake. Arnold Palmer Invitational, 2022. Jon Rahm had already done the hard part, getting his ball onto the green. All that remained was a 25-centimeter putt to save par. Not even a foot, not half a meter, just the kind of putt anyone would hole without thinking. Rahm stepped in quickly, gave it a gentle tap, and the ball came up short. The Spaniard stood frozen for a few seconds, staring in disbelief as if the ball had betrayed him. Although he holed the next attempt, the damage was already done. That tiny mistake went down as one of the most unusual misses of his career, a blemish fans will never forget. Moment 22. The towel that cost Craig Stadler a fortune. San Diego Open, 1987. Craig Stadler faced a difficult shot under a tree. To make the swing, he had to kneel, but he was wearing pristine white pants. He decided to place a towel on the ground to avoid getting them dirty. It seemed harmless, until a viewer at home called the rules officials. According to the rules, this constituted building a stance, something strictly forbidden. After reviewing the footage, the officials confirmed the infraction. Stadler had already signed and turned in his scorecard without including the penalty, which resulted in his immediate disqualification. He lost a second-place finish worth $37,000, all to protect his pants. An absurd anecdote that went down in history as one of the most ridiculous penalties ever seen in professional golf. Moment 23. Danny Lee's putting ordeal. U.S. Open, 2020. Danny Lee stood over a par putt of barely 5 feet on the 18th hole, a distance professionals convert almost every time. But what followed was a true horror movie. He missed the first, then the second, then the third. The ball simply refused to go in. When he finally holed it, 6 attempts had passed, and the scorecard showed a painful 9 on a single hole. The frustration boiled over. Lee unleashed his anger by smashing his bag with the putter as if it were a punching bag. Shortly afterward, he withdrew from the tournament, citing a wrist injury. A withdrawal many interpreted as the direct consequence of his uncontrolled rage, when in history, as one of the most ridiculous penalties ever seen in professional golf. Moment 24. Greg Norman's fall at Augusta. Masters Tournament, 1996. Greg Norman began Sunday with a 6-shot lead. After so many disappointments at Augusta, it seemed like his moment of redemption. But Augusta shows no mercy. His advantage evaporated shot by shot. While Nick Faldo applied steady pressure, Norman piled up bogeys and mistakes. The defining moment came at the 15th hole, a chip for eagle that could have changed everything narrowly missed. And with it, his spirit slipped away as well. Norman dropped to his knees, then fell backward onto the grass, staring up at the tops of the pines in a gesture of total defeat. An iconic image in golf history, but also the snapshot of his greatest humiliation. By the time the round ended, Faldo had turned a 6-shot deficit into a 5-shot victory. For Norman, that Sunday was far more than a loss. It was the most painful and embarrassing day of his career. Of the most ridiculous penalties ever seen in professional golf. Moment 25. The security guards slip at the Masters Tournament, 2019. Tiger Woods, in the middle of a historic comeback, had just struck a brilliant shot on the 14th hole. The crowd was buzzing and the tension was at its peak. Then the unthinkable happened. A security guard, trying to hold back spectators, lost his footing on the damp grass and slid violently toward Woods himself. For a moment, it looked as if he was going to crash into the 5-time Masters champion in the middle of the decisive round. The crowd held its breath. A collision could have changed the course of history. Fortunately, the guard stopped just inches from Tiger, who needed only a few seconds to regain his composure and continue on his way to victory. The episode remains one of the most unusual scenes at Augusta. A security guard turned accidental protagonist, coming dangerously close to harming the tournament's biggest star. Moment 26. Nelly Korda's Nightmare at the U.S. Women's Open. May 2024. Lancaster Country Club. Nelly Korda, the world number 1, arrived at the par 3 12th hole. A direct shot to the green should have been routine, but that day nothing went as planned. Her tee shot landed in the bunker. She failed on her first attempt to escape. The second was worse. The ball ended up in the water. She tried again, back into the water. And a third time, the same outcome. 3 consecutive balls sinking, each splash amplifying the drama. She eventually finished the hole with a painful 10 on a par 3. A crushing result that left her 12 shots behind the leader and with a final scorecard of 80, far from her usual level. A round that showed how even the best player in the world can get trapped in a hole with no way out. Moment 27. Tiger Woods' hell at Augusta's 12th Masters Tournament, 2020. Just 1 year after his historic victory in 2019, Tiger Woods returned to Augusta to defend the green jacket. But at the legendary 12th hole, deep in Amen Corner, he lived through one of the darkest chapters of his career. His first shot landed in Reyes Creek, a recoverable mistake, but the second also into the water, and the third, the same fate. 3 consecutive times. The ball sank into the stream that has shattered so many dreams throughout history. On his 4th attempt, Woods finally avoided the water, only to end up in the bunker. After a difficult escape and 2 more putts, he signed for a 10 on a single hole, the worst score of his career at Augusta. In the Birdman at the U.S. Open, U.S. Open 2012, Webb Simpson was about to seal the most important victory of his career when something bizarre interrupted the calm of the green. Suddenly, a spectator dressed in a bird costume appeared running, flapping his arms as if he were about to take flight. The crowd was left bewildered, and security had to intervene immediately to remove him from the course, while the so-called Birdman continued making absurd gestures in front of the cameras. Simpson, with his trademark humor, reacted with a line that became memorable: "Enjoy the sell, buddy." The scene, half comic and half surreal, broke the usual solemn tone of golf and was immortalized as one of the strangest interruptions ever seen in a major. Moment 29. Ernie Els' disaster on Augusta's first hole. Masters Tournament, 2016. Ernie Els, a multiple major champion, began his round with the confidence of someone who knows every corner of Augusta. But on the opening hole, he lived through a nightmare no one could have imagined. His first putt for birdie slid just wide. And so, stroke after stroke, the scene became nightmarish. He needed 6 attempts to hole out from very short distances. The crowd watched in absolute silence, witnessing the dreaded yips take hold of a champion. El signed for a 10 on the first hole, one of the most painful starts ever seen at the Masters. A cruel reminder that at Augusta, neither experience nor titles protect against humiliation. Moment 30. The drunk fan at the Phoenix Open. Waste Management Phoenix Open, 2018. This tournament is famous for its festive atmosphere, with grandstands that feel more like a stadium than a golf course. But that euphoria sometimes goes too far. Jordan Spieth was preparing to hit his shot at the famous 16th hole when a visibly drunk spectator began shouting non-stop. At first it was annoying, then unbearable. The noise shattered Spieth's concentration right at the moment of his swing. The situation ended with security escorting the fan off the course, amid boos and awkward laughter. A clear example of how misplaced passion can ruin the spectacle and turn a fan into the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. Golf is a sport of precision, patience, and elegance, but it is also a ruthless stage where even the best can experience their most embarrassing moments. From legends like Tiger Woods and Greg Norman to unexpected figures like fans or security guards, everyone has left unforgettable marks on the history of golf. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the most bizarre and painful episodes ever seen on a golf course. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and share this content with other golf lovers. And don't forget to leave us a comment. Which of these moments was for you the most embarrassing of all?